Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Lubna Hussain, welcoming you to this very special Ramadan edition of Bridges. Kul aam wa antum bi khair. We are delighted to welcome on this program the distinguished Dr. Naik, who is the president of Islamic Research Foundation in Mumbai and also the founder of Peace TV, and Dr. Mazen Mutabbagani, who is the associate professor of Orientalistics, which is the Western scholarship of Islam at King Saud University. Welcome to the program. First, we're going to go to a report now where we ask some of the Muslims and non-Muslims here in Riyadh during the holy month of Ramadan on how best to learn and understand Islam. We'll be back right after this.
Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan Mubarak, and lanterns. These are some of the words and shapes that you see gracing all the streets, shopping centers, and public places here in Riyadh. So we felt it's only appropriate to start our episode today with a congratulation to our dear viewers on this holy season of Ramadan.
Well, you know, Ramadan is a time of year that everybody looks forward to, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, because it's just such a festival in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh especially. You've got people out you've got people out in the evening, you've got the lanterns, you've got the atmosphere, and it's a special time of year in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, it's pretty nice in Riyadh and in Saudi Arabia, particularly Riyadh, Jeddah. I'm here for vacation now from UK. I'm enjoying it in Ramadan in UK and Riyadh. It's very nice. Going mosques, going Tarawih. It's really nice. I'm enjoying it in Ramadan in Saudi Arabia.
For us, we tend always to go where the crowd goes to. So sometimes we also do the fasting because it seems that we find it quite healthy for us to do the same thing as what the Muslims do. And then the problem is that normally they have longer hours, so we tend always to sleep late at night. But then we enjoy the Ramadan.
We asked members of the public what they think is the most appropriate source to get knowledge and information about Islam.
The Holy Quran. But see, the Holy Quran is not for everybody. They have to understand it in Arabic. But some people can't speak Arabic very good, or they don't even know Arabic.
Well, there are lots of sources, but I guess the best source would be somebody who actually understands Islam and somebody who could put it to you in your terms, speak your language. So the best source would be people that actually understand Islam and can, put it across to you in a way that is easy to understand, without complicating it and making it, very frustrating for you. So the best source, I think, is people. Not so much books, more as people. Books are good, but I prefer people.
Normally, I always go to Bata Center, and always there's available leaflets that the Dawah Center, that they give always to the Filipinos. And normally we read, they have English version, they have the Tagalog version, and that's the good information that I get about Islam.
So is the internet really a reliable source of information with all the misconception about Islam? Knowing that the internet is open to anyone to post whatever they want. Most of the people who know a little bit about Islam know that the holy book, the Quran and the Sunnah are the main sources of information about Islam. But to our surprise, many of the people who we interviewed in Saudi Arabia included the internet as a reliable source of knowledge, even though they have more reliable sources through many institutions, foundations that give knowledge about this great religion. Based on the views of some of the foreigners in Saudi Arabia, we found out they responded very well in changing their perception about Islam through other people.
From internet and from Quran Kareem and from library.
I think the internet, the library, and different types of literature.
I think to use to go to library or internet or radio is very easy. Borrow some books from library, read through, that is.
Welcome back to this special Ramadan episode of Bridges. I'm Lubna Hussain, and I'm delighted to be joined with very distinguished company this evening. We have Dr. Naik, who's president of the Islamic Research Foundation in Mumbai, and Dr. Mazen Mutabbagani, who's the associate professor of Orientalistics at King Saud University. Welcome back to the program. Now, we saw this brief report, and of course there's a very festive atmosphere because of Ramadan. A very important point, I think, is the knowledge and information which both of you are equally familiar with, and the dissemination of the correct knowledge pertaining to Islam. the different sources, for example, that we just heard about, people-to-people contact, pamphlets, books, institutions, and what seems to be increasingly important is the internet. How do you rate these sources? What do you think is probably the most reliable of those sources, Dr. Naik?
The most reliable source for Islamic knowledge is the glorious Quran, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is number one. And if a person doesn't understand the language of the Quran directly, he should read the translation of the language and understand is the best. If he knows English, read the English translation of the Quran. If he knows Urdu, the Urdu translation. So number one is the glorious Quran. After that is the Sahih, the authentic hadith of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So number one Quran and then the authentic hadith. And after that you can go to the other sources.
But do you think most people realistically actually will go to the Quran to find out about Islam? This is my point. I mean, of course what you've said is absolutely correct. No one can dispute that fact. But in actuality, is that something that happens? Do you find? Because I know that you do a lot of propagation.
People may not directly read the Quran, but they may read a book, maybe a small book which may inspire them, maybe Quran and modern science, or maybe any other book which a person is interested in. He may be interested in science, he may be interested in poetry, maybe literature. So whatever field a person likes, he reads the booklet, and when he's inspired, then I say that the main source is the Quran. Right. He may not go to the Quran directly, though I know many reverts. There are many non-Muslims who read the Quran and then reverted to Islam. So every non-Muslim or every Muslim may not read the Quran directly. But finally the main source is, and the best knowledge of Islam is the Quran. Then the Sahih Hadith. As we mentioned that we read that there are booklets, there are pamphlets, all are good, mashallah. There are magazines, there are internet. But what we realize on the internet is good, at the same time it is bad.
But it's as good as the people who are posting the information.
That's right. Why we have realized that as far as the literature is concerned, to print a literature, it takes time, it requires money. But for internet, on the internet, any person can post anything.
This is the problem.
So we have things against Islam and for Islam. Mm-hmm. So what we have realized that going on the internet, it is not very reliable unless you know how to surf on the net. So if a layman goes on the internet and tries to understand Islam, I wouldn't advise him. Right. If he's an expert on the net, how to find what is authentic, which website is authentic, then it's a good source. If he's not aware of it, I would not advise that a layman should go on the net and try and find about Islam. Unless he's guided, which source should he go to, which website should he go to, then it may be a good source. Right. Otherwise, it's very dangerous because there are websites which have got Islamic names, but they are controlled by non-Muslims who are against Islam, and they give information against the Quran. So a layman may get misguided.
What do you think, Dr. Mutabak?
Well, I think it depends on the background of the person who is searching knowledge about Islam. If he is a university student, if he is a high school student, or if he is a layman. So it depends on his position, his education. So for academics, they would go as Dr. Naik said, the Quran first, the translations. But as for the internet, I think there are some very famous sites about Islam, like Islam Online. The Ministry of Islamic Affairs has a big site, Q&A. But I don't know how easy would people reach these good and authentic sites.
What about
learning from Muslim scholars, Muslim sheikhs who should be available or should be more available to people to learn about Islam. And I think this is what we may be lacking in most of the world, that who is to speak about Islam.
And the person-to-person thing does have its own merits, does it not?
Of course.
Because that is far more convincing, I think.
That the best dawah anyone can do, it is person to person.
Absolutely.
That's what the Prophet did and the Sahaba did. So best impact is person to person. But then we realize that person to person is one to one.
Right.
So if a person speaks one to one, the impact is the maximum, but the reach is the minimum. So if you go on the net, the reach is more. If you go on the satellite, the reach is millions. So the impact is less, but the reach is million. So net effect is but natural, more on the satellite than on one-to-one.
How do we counter the negative propaganda that has been raised about our religion?
As far as the negative propaganda that has been done about a religion, that I believe that the best source, as Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Imran, chapter number 3, verse number 64, Allah says, "Ta'alaw ila kalmatin sawa'in bainana wa bainakum." Come to common terms as between us and you. So what we have to realize that whenever anyone attacks Islam or counters or speaks something negative about Islam, we have to quote from his source.
Right.
For example, when I go to states and I speak to the Christians, if they point out something negative of the Quran, I give a similar reference in their Bible. If I speak to the Hindu, I speak about their scriptures, the Veda, the Bhagavad Gita, and it has a tremendous effect because unfortunately the people do not read their own scriptures.
So this is what we must do,
Yes.
become better versed
Yes, and suppose
in a panorama of scriptures. Is that not the case?
One thing is scripture if they're religious. If they're not religious, then we have to quote their sources, the authentic sources, what they think is authentic, whether it be the website source or whether the USA Department of Justice, whatever it is. So when we quote their sources and try and prove a point, that's the best way to convince them.
Have you found that there's been a rise in negative propaganda recently? There seems to have been a rise, of course, post 9/11, and things seem to be sort of dipping in our favour. And it seems again there seems to be a rise. Have you found that?
Yes, it is going up and down, and every time there's an issue coming up every month or every couple of weeks. But the way we respond is very important.
This is the crux of the situation.
Well, as for the misconceptions, I was thinking before coming here that there are two factors. Now, the present conditions, situation, reality of the Muslims, I think that is very important. How Muslims are we? How much do we apply Islam to our life? How much do we follow Islam in politics, in economics, in social life? That is very important for either creating misconceptions or good picture. Since Muslims are a little bit away from Islam nowadays, I think that's very difficult to tell people that Islam is great and excellent
when it's not in practice.
When we are in practice are not being real Muslims. We are not, sometimes we are not honest, we are not truthful, we are not loyal to Islam, we are not hard workers, as Islam calls for people to be honest in their work and doing their jobs. So this is one part of the misconceptions. The other factor to misconceptions is how Islam is taught in universities and in schools in the West. I think we have a long way to go to either erase these misconceptions or present the true picture of Islam. And from my experience attending so many conferences, tens of conferences in the Western world, in Western European universities, and I think that we are not putting enough effort to present Islam. And I always go into bookstores and I look at the shelves where books on Islam, and I feel that we are not doing enough to present Islam. How many Muslims are writing books in English or in other languages? And we find that most of the books on Islam are written by non-Muslims. And even in the universities, most of the books that are taught or read or used as textbooks are written by non-Muslims. Professors who are teaching Islam at European universities, even though there are few names, but I think we still have a lot to do to present the right view of what Islam is.
And this is our problem, is it not, Dr. Naik? That we expect everybody to understand us, whereas we don't really practice what we preach. And there's a huge lag, it seems, between what it is that we espouse and what it is that we try and portray as part of our doctrine, and yet our daily practice is completely far away from the reality and the truth of what Islam is supposed to embody.
I do agree with you that part of the fact is that there are some Muslims not practicing Islam, but what I feel that the major factor to the misconception is the way the media portrays Islam.
This is of course correct.
So the main thing that I feel is today the way Islam is looked by the world, meaning the non-Muslims, is the way the media portrays Islam. And we find today on the international media, whether it be the newspapers, the international magazines, or the radio broadcast stations, or the satellite channels, we find that there is virulent propaganda about Islam. And they're bombarding misconception about Islam. And unfortunately, most of the people that see this media, whether it be the newspapers, the magazines, satellite channels, they have a preconceived idea about Islam. So I would say that the number one reason is the way the media portrays Islam. Yes, there are black sheep in our community. I'm not saying all Muslims practice Islam to the T, but the main thing is the media. So what we have to do, that we Muslims should have our own media.
Which is what you've started.
Yes.
So which is what you started with Peace TV, that has 60 million viewers. Am I correct? With yeah, and it's the largest viewed Islamic satellite channel in the world. Right.
I would like to add that we should also show positiveness in responding to the media. When there are bad misconceptions or portrayal of Islam, what are Muslims doing? You know, people say when there is something bad said about Jews, for example, I think there would be the TV station or the newspaper would be flooded with letters, complaints. But when it is about Islam, the response is always minimum, and I don't know how we can go about that. I remember about 10-15 years ago, one of the TV channels in California showed a movie that was giving misconceptions about Islam. People there responded immediately, where the director of production of that TV came on the channel and apologized for the Muslims, and they stopped showing that movie. So when we respond positively and we learn how to respond positively, I think we can stop much of the misconceptions. I know we cannot stop all the misconceptions, all the bad portrayal of Islam, but we can do something. I think that there is a chance for us to use the media positively.
Our next report is from London, and this report actually sheds light into the misconceptions that exist about Islam, the role of ordinary and influential people in the UK in dispelling these misunderstandings on Islam. We'll be back right after this.
With recent events in the world and the ongoing conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, there have been a consistent stream of negative portrayals of Islam in the Western media. The focus of many Western broadcasting services on a few extremist Islamic groups and their portrayals of these groups as being representative of Islam and Muslims in general have left a very bitter taste in the mouths of many Western audiences.
I don't know so much about it, and I personally have no opinion, no issue with it, so I wouldn't know how to kind of comment on that. But I do think it's a media also not really helping in certain ways.
I read the Times, I read the Independent, I read the Telegraph, I read the Economist. They tend to be, I think, relatively objective. I'm not reading the Daily Express. The reason I don't read the Daily Express is because I know I'm going to get shows on reports on asylum seekers, and it's going to be Islamophobic. But I think, I think you can find relatively objective assessment of it, but I don't know. I wouldn't know where else to go, actually.
Needless to say, such negative and stereotypical media images have to varying degrees had a very adverse effect upon relations between British Muslims and non-Muslims alike. This has done nothing in terms of reducing any existing tensions that may exist within Britain between Muslims and non-Muslims, and if anything, has contributed to gaining support for right-wing exclusive political views within the country. The vast majority of the public who have not been brainwashed by the media simply seem to have very little knowledge of the Islamic faith.
If I wanted more information about Islam, I'm not sure where I would go particularly. I know there's the Regent's Park Mosque, but I would probably go to a bookshop or try the internet.
It's hard to know. You've got to make sure it's vetted information, don't you, and that it's from a good source. And you never... you'd probably be best to read the Quran or something like that to get first-hand and formulate your own opinion after that.
Much of the responsibility for changing the lack of awareness and knowledge about the peaceful nature of Islam must fall upon Islamic associations who can use their resources and network of contacts to organise more conferences and events that are targeted specifically towards non-Muslim audiences. In addition, influential Muslims need to exploit their access to the media to spread a positive image of the faith and its followers. Finally, the average British Muslim holds a lot of potential in winning hearts and minds on the ground level on a daily basis through their social and work circles. It seems there's much to do to raise an accurate awareness of Islam within the UK, This responsibility falls collectively upon Islamic associations, influential Muslims with access to the media, as well as upon the average British Muslim themselves. This is also dependent upon the openness and willingness to learn of the non-Muslim British public at large. Alexis Tomlin for Bridges, Saudi TV Channel 2, London.
Welcome back to this Ramadan special of Bridges. I'm Lubna Hussain, and I'm joined in the very distinguished company by Dr. Zakir Naik, who's the president of the Islamic Research Foundation in Mumbai, India, and Dr. Mazen Mutabbegani, who is the associate professor of Orientalistics at King Saud University. Welcome back. I think that's very, very important. What we just saw is that the media, like you had said just before we went into that report, is essential. It's key for us to focus our efforts, focus our resources, of which we have extensive resources. I mean, and our people power of over 1 billion Muslims in the world. We need to focus these assets that we have to actually get a better control of the media, not control of the media, but a better influence at least in the media. And I think that Dr. Mazen, just a short while ago, you made an excellent point. Why are we so entirely apathetic when it comes to responding to things? Like you said, if had it been